He thought power came from fear until Morgan Freeman proved him wrong. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual chatter, laughter, trays clattering, the rhythmic hum of conversations blending together. But then, the sound of a tray hitting the floor. Silence rippled outward. All eyes turned to the new kid. Morgan Freeman stood still, his face unreadable. Across from him, Reggie Dawson, the school's biggest bully, smirking like he had already won. What happened next? No one saw it coming. Does respect come from power or character? Comment 1 for character, 0 for power. Morgan Freeman had been at Greenwood High for exactly 1 week, and already he had a target on his back. He had seen the looks, heard the whispers. The quiet kid, the new kid, easy pickings. It didn't matter that he kept to himself. In a school ruled by power and intimidation, silence was mistaken for weakness. And in Reggie Dawson's world, weakness was an invitation. So today, in the middle of the cafeteria, Reggie made his move. A deliberate bump, a calculated shove. Morgan's tray clattered to the floor, food splattered across his shoes. Laughter erupted. Reggie leaned in, towering over him. "Looks like you lost your lunch, newbie." Morgan didn't move, didn't flinch. His eyes met Reggie's, calm and measuring. And that silence, the stillness of it, felt heavier than any insult. Reggie's smirk faltered just a fraction. The cafeteria watched, waiting. Would the new kid take the hit and walk away? Would he fight back? Then, Morgan took a step forward. Not aggressive, not afraid, just controlled. He tilted his head slightly. "Are you sure?" he said, voice low, calm in a way that sent a chill through the room. "That this is how you want this to go?" And in that moment, for the first time in his life, Reggie Dawson felt something he had never felt before. For a long, tense moment, the cafeteria was frozen. Morgan Freeman stood his ground, calm and unshaken, while Reggie Dawson's smirk wavered, just for a fraction of a second. The onlookers held their breath. Would the new kid back down? Would he snap? Then Reggie laughed. The sound was sharp, forced, an attempt to cover the hesitation creeping into his chest. "Oh, we got a tough guy here," he sneered, clapping his hands mockingly. The laughter from his crew followed, though it lacked its usual undeniable confidence. Morgan didn't react. He bent down, picked up his tray with measured precision, and set it back on the table. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away. Reggie's jaw clenched. He had expected anger, embarrassment, anything but this. But Morgan had just dismissed him. And that was unforgivable. That night, as Reggie and his 2 closest lackeys, Tony and Marcus, sat outside the basketball court, the topic was clear. "Who does that guy think he is?" Tony scoffed, tossing a basketball against the pavement. "No clue," Marcus muttered. "But that was weird, man. He didn't even flinch." Reggie leaned back, arms crossed, brow furrowed in thought. He was used to getting a reaction. That's how power worked. You made someone feel small, weak, controlled, and everyone else saw it, so no one dared challenge you. But Morgan? Morgan had refused to play the game, and that was a challenge Reggie wasn't about to ignore. "He thinks he's above us," Reggie muttered. "We'll see about that." Tony grinned. "What's the plan?" Reggie exhaled slowly, his mind already calculating. "We'll hit him where it hurts," he said. "But we'll do it slow, break him down." Marcus hesitated. "You sure about this, man? He doesn't seem like the type to..." Reggie shot him a look. "Are you scared?" Marcus bristled. "No, I just..." "Then we're done talking," Reggie snapped. He smirked, eyes dark with satisfaction. "Tomorrow we show Morgan Freeman what happens when you don't know your place." The next day, Morgan walked into the cafeteria, tray in hand, scanning the room like he always did. A habit, an instinct. Years of moving from place to place had taught him one thing: always know your surroundings. He had expected today to be quiet. He was wrong. Just as he reached his usual seat, something slammed into his back. A splat of mashed potatoes slid down his shoulder. Laughter exploded around the room. Morgan stopped, took a breath, turned slowly, and there was Reggie, smirking, spoon still in hand. "Whoops," he drawled. "Guess you were in the way?" Morgan met his gaze. Calm, unmoved, he picked up a napkin, wiped his shirt, and sat down as if nothing had happened. Reggie's smirk twitched. Tony leaned in, whispering, "Dude, he's not even mad." Reggie's jaw tightened. "Then we're not done." Later that afternoon, as Morgan headed to his locker, he felt it before he saw it. That presence. The way the hallway suddenly felt smaller. He exhaled as he pulled open his locker, and a shower of torn-up paper rained down on him. Snickers echoed from behind. Morgan glanced at the mess, then slowly turned. Reggie leaned against the lockers, arms crossed. "Man, your locker is messy," and he said, voice dripping with amusement. Tony and Marcus stood beside him, grinning. This time, Morgan didn't ignore them. He closed his locker, and then, for the first time, he spoke. "Are you done?" Reggie's grin faltered. "Oh, we're just getting started." Morgan held his gaze for a long, steady moment. Then he nodded. "Then I hope you're ready," he said quietly, "for what happens next." Reggie Dawson had spent years establishing dominance in Greenwood High. His rules were simple: show strength, break the weak, and never be questioned. Yet here was Morgan Freeman, a quiet, seemingly unimposing kid who refused to fall in line, refused to react, refused to fear him. And that was unacceptable. Reggie wasn't done. He was just getting started. The next day, Morgan arrived at school to find his locker vandalized. Black marker scrawled across the metal, ugly words scratched into the surface. Freak. Loser. Know your place. A few students snickered as they walked past, watching to see his reaction. Morgan didn't give them one. He stared at the words, exhaled slowly, then opened his locker like nothing had happened. Across the hall, Reggie watched, and his smirk faded, because Morgan wasn't breaking. And that meant Reggie had to push harder. By lunchtime, the tension was thicker than the air before a storm. Reggie's patience was running thin. "Enough with the slow burn," he muttered to Tony and Marcus. "We end this today." And so they waited, watched, and when the opportunity came, they took it. Morgan was walking across the basketball court after school, backpack slung over his shoulder, when he heard footsteps behind him. Then a hard shove. His balance wavered. Another shove, harder this time. Morgan staggered forward but didn't fall. He turned, and there was Reggie, grinning like a predator who had just cornered his prey. Tony and Marcus flanked him, blocking any escape. "You think you're tough, don't you?" Reggie sneered. Morgan met his gaze. "No." The answer caught Reggie off guard. Morgan shifted his backpack higher on his shoulder, completely unfazed. "But I think you're scared." Reggie's smirk vanished. The laughter from Tony and Marcus died instantly. For the first time, Reggie felt something unfamiliar creeping in. Not anger, not frustration. That doubt lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then Reggie's face twisted in rage. "Scared?" he spat. "Of you?" Without warning, he swung. A brutal punch, fast, fueled by anger. It should have landed. It should have put Morgan on the ground, but instead, Morgan moved, not frantically, not in panic, controlled, precise. Reggie's fist cut through empty air, and in that split second of imbalance, Morgan struck. Not a punch, not an attack, just a simple step forward, a shift in weight, and suddenly, Reggie was off balance. Morgan guided him downward, using his own force against him. The next thing Reggie knew, he was on his back, flat on the pavement, staring up at the sky, completely stunned. The silence was deafening. Tony and Marcus froze, their confidence shattered. Morgan? Morgan hadn't even broken a sweat. He adjusted his backpack, looked down at Reggie, and said only one thing: "Now we're done." Then he turned and walked away. Reggie lay there, breathing hard, realization dawning. Morgan hadn't just beaten him, he had ended him. And tomorrow, everyone in school would know exactly what had happened. By the next morning, everyone knew. Reggie Dawson, the biggest bully in Greenwood High, had been knocked down. Not with fists, not with violence, with control, with skill, with absolute dominance. And the worst part? Morgan Freeman hadn't even tried. The moment Morgan walked through the school's front doors, he felt it. The whispers, the stolen glances, the way students moved out of his way instead of ignoring him. For the first time since he arrived, he wasn't invisible. And at the center of it all, Reggie Dawson. Sitting at his usual table, flanked by Tony and Marcus, his bruised ego more visible than any actual injury. His usual smug grin, gone. His usual booming laughter, absent. Reggie wasn't used to losing, and now he had a choice to make. Let it go, or try again. Morgan already knew which option he'd pick. It happened just before lunch. Ava Carter, one of the few students who hadn't laughed at him on his first day, walked up to Morgan at his locker. "Reggie's looking for you," she said quietly. Morgan barely reacted. "Of course he is." Ava hesitated. "You should be careful. He's not the type to let this slide." Morgan glanced at her, then smiled slightly. "Neither am I." The bell rang, and as expected, Reggie was waiting. Morgan stepped into the empty hallway behind the gym. Reggie stood there, arms crossed, his usual confidence cracked, but not broken. Tony and Marcus were there too, though this time they looked less sure. "You think you won?" Reggie asked, voice low. Morgan sighed. "I think this needs to end." Reggie's jaw clenched. "Not until I say so." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "I don't care how good you think you are. You embarrassed me. And I don't let things like that slide." Morgan met his gaze, calm and steady. "Then let me make something clear," he said. "This is your only warning." Tony and Marcus shifted uneasily. "Warning?" Reggie scoffed. "I don't think you understand how this works, new kid." Morgan tilted his head slightly. "No," he said. "I don't think you do." Morgan took a slow step forward. Not aggressive, not threatening, just measured. And for the second time, Reggie felt something unfamiliar creeping in. Doubt. Morgan's voice dropped so low only Reggie could hear. "I didn't fight you yesterday. I controlled you." Reggie's breath hitched. "I could have done worse," Morgan continued, "but I didn't, because I don't need to." Silence. Reggie clenched his fists, but he didn't swing, because deep down he knew. Morgan wasn't scared of him. Morgan had never been scared of him. And if they fought again, Reggie wouldn't just lose, he'd be destroyed. Morgan held his gaze a moment longer, then stepped back. "Last chance, Reggie," he said. "Walk away." Reggie didn't move, didn't speak, didn't blink. Then, finally, he turned and walked away. Tony and Marcus hesitated, then hurried after him. The hallway was silent. Morgan exhaled slowly, because he knew. This wasn't over. Reggie Dawson might have walked away today, but he wasn't the type to accept defeat forever. For days, Reggie Dawson said nothing. No pranks, no shoves, no whispers of humiliation behind Morgan Freeman's back. To most, it looked like he had let it go. But Morgan knew better. He had seen men like Reggie before, bullies who couldn't handle the idea of being outmatched. And if there was one thing predictable about people like him, it was this. They never stayed quiet for long. It happened on a Friday afternoon. The hallways were emptying as students poured into the parking lot, eager to start their weekend. Morgan walked toward the side entrance where he usually took a shortcut to avoid the crowd. He had just reached the doors when, click, the lock slid into place. He turned. Reggie stood a few feet away, smirking. Behind him, Tony and Marcus blocking the only exit. Morgan sighed. "You're really this predictable, huh?" Reggie gritted his teeth at the casual tone. "You think you're funny?" Morgan shrugged. I think I'm tired." Reggie's smirk widened. "That makes two of us." And then he swung. Reggie's fist came fast, fueled by weeks of frustration, humiliation, and bruised pride. This time, Morgan didn't step away. He let the punch connect, a direct hit to his jaw. The force sent him stumbling back, but he didn't fall, didn't react, didn't flinch. Reggie, breathing hard, grinned like he had won. "Not so tough now, huh?" Morgan straightened, rolling his jaw. Then he smiled, a slow, knowing smile, like he had just confirmed something important, like he had just let Reggie play his final card. And Reggie, he didn't like that smile. Morgan exhaled, flexing his fingers. "That was your best shot?" he asked, voice calm. Reggie blinked. "What?" "I said," Morgan repeated, "was that the best you had?" Reggie's confidence wavered. Morgan took a slow step forward. "Because if that was it," another step, "then you have a serious problem." Reggie swung again, this time with more force, more desperation. Morgan moved, a single shift of weight. The punch missed completely, and before Reggie could regain balance, Morgan struck. Not a wild punch, not a reckless move, just one clean hit, a sharp, precise strike to Reggie's ribs, enough to knock the air from his lungs. Reggie staggered. For the first time in his life, he felt powerless. Morgan took a step back. He didn't gloat, didn't mock. He simply waited. Reggie clutched his side, breath coming fast. He could attack again, could try one last time to reclaim control, but something inside him had already broken. He knew it. Morgan knew it, and when Tony and Marcus saw the look in Reggie's eyes, they knew it too. The fight was over, not because Reggie had lost, but because he had nothing left to win. The first punch had landed, but the last punch never came. The moment hung heavy in the air. Reggie Dawson stumbled back, gripping his ribs, his breath ragged, his mind raced. This was supposed to be his victory. This was supposed to be the moment he reclaimed his power. But instead, he was the one struggling to stay on his feet. And the worst part? Morgan Freeman hadn't even broken a sweat. Tony and Marcus stood frozen behind Reggie, their usual smirks long gone. For the first time, they weren't backing up their leader. They were watching him lose. And in their silence, Reggie felt it. The shift. The unraveling of everything he had built. Because respect in Greenwood High wasn't given. It was taken. And now, it had been taken from him. Morgan took a slow, steady step forward. Not in aggression, not to attack, just to end it. Reggie flinched, and that was the moment everything changed. Morgan sighed, shaking his head. "This was never about me, Reggie." His voice was calm, steady, not mocking, not angry. "This was about you, about what you thought power was." Reggie clenched his jaw, but he didn't speak. Morgan tilted his head slightly. "And now," he continued, "now you know what it feels like to be the one on the ground." A long silence stretched between them. Reggie had no comeback, no insults, no threats, just quiet defeat. Morgan took a deep breath and stepped back. "We're done." He turned, picked up his backpack, and walked away. No dramatic exit, no final blow, because he didn't need one. And that was what made it worse. Reggie watched him go, his body still aching, his pride shattered. For the first time, he wasn't the one people were afraid of, and the weight of that realization was heavier than any punch. By the time Monday rolled around, the entire school knew. The whispers followed Reggie everywhere. "Did you hear what happened? Reggie tried to fight Morgan and got destroyed. He barely even touched him." And the worst part? No one was afraid of Reggie anymore. No one moved out of his way in the halls. No one lowered their voices when he walked by. He had become what he hated most, irrelevant. And Morgan simply existed, calm, unbothered, untouched, because he never needed to prove anything in the first place. Reggie thought the fight would end with his victory, but in the end, it wasn't fists that defeated him. It was the truth. Reggie Dawson had spent years believing fear was power, that control came from making others feel weak. But now, as he sat alone at lunch, the same table where he once ruled, he finally understood. Fear isn't respect, and the moment people stopped fearing him, he had nothing left. Across the cafeteria, Morgan Freeman sat at his usual spot eating quietly. No crowd, no attention, just peace. And for the first time, Reggie envied that. Not the strength, not the skill, just the calm confidence that didn't need to be proven. One day he'd understand how to earn that. But today he just had to live with the fact that he had been wrong. And that was the hardest lesson of all. Because real strength isn't in dominance. It's in knowing you never needed it to begin with. Through this story, we realize that true power isn't about control. It's about respect. Morgan Freeman never needed to fight for dominance. He simply knew who he was. Meanwhile, Reggie relied on fear to maintain control, only to lose everything when that fear disappeared. This story reminds us that real respect is earned through character, not intimidation. That the strongest people aren't the loudest, but the ones who never let their worth be dictated by others. And that, in the end, it's not about how many people fear you, but how many people truly respect you.